What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall market. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. Deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer has been extended until March 31st, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's talk about what's happening with the market. So, as I mentioned in the morning, the PPI data came out. The data was quite decent because on the month over month basis, all the data was below expectations. But if you look at the year over year basis, core PPI was aligned with expectations, not looking way too bad. But then on the year over year basis, this ended up coming out not as great. So let me just reload the page. I think my numbers were not showing. So sorry about that. Just to clarify, month over month was below expectations for PPI and core. And then for core PPI year over year, this was aligned with expectations, whereas year over year, for all items, this was also aligned with expectations, but it did show a slight increase compared to before. So, as a result of this data coming out, the market pushed a bit. We saw Tesla hit the 420s. We saw SPY hit basically 586, but we were not able to sustain that level. And now SPY is trying to slow down. So, the question is, what's going to happen from this point on? The answer is, if you look at SPY, okay, I'm eyeing a possible inverse head and shoulders that could be forming, but we need to get a bounce. And in order for us to get that bounce, at least off this key support, that's going to depend on what happens tomorrow when we have CPI data coming up before market open, not to mention the big bank earnings. So I'll talk more about those factors later on, but just know this is what the setup we're going to be eyeing. And it's not a guarantee if it's going to play out or not. So I see a very, very clear left shoulder, just like right here. This was like our head, the big tip that we ended up getting yesterday, right? And then this right here, this pump actually aligns very nicely with this. So it's now like approaching the neckline area. So we'll have to see if we end up getting, if we do pull back to about 580, we have to see if that holds. If not, we're looking for 578. And then if that holds, we'll be looking to see if we get a bounce like this. If we do get a bounce like this off 578 to 580, then that could be setting us up for a potential pump like this for the inverse head and shoulders. But this could also be a trap. And if we end up getting a hot CPI and we fail to hold 578, then that could be a sign this is about to fail and this could continue to dump to new lows. And then the trend would remain a lot more bearish because we would continually be making, lower highs and lower lows, right? We had this high up here around the 600 area, came down, made a lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and then we could be making another lower low to continue to fall all the way back down. That's also very possible when you consider the fact that on SPY, on the much larger time frame, we happen to have the head and shoulders that's still present. So on the much bigger time frame, on the 4-hour time frame, this setup is still here, the left shoulder, the head, and the right shoulder. And if we end up losing 578, we could continue to dump all the way down to like the low 570s, if not as low as 566. So you want to be very careful with this head and shoulders that's still existent. And this is going to be very dependent on what happens with CPI coming out for tomorrow. So with that being said, what do I think is going to happen from this point on? I think SPY was seeing a lot of shuffling. It's showing a little bit of weakness. Our range was going to be between at this resistance at 585. We're really struggling to break past that, but our support to watch for is very close to 580. If SPY loses 580, we're looking for 578, and there's going to be a risk of this dipping a little bit more. I am seeing some weakness throughout the markets, but even if we do dip more, we'll be watching this possible inverse head and shoulders to see if this pans out or not. Once again, there's about a 50-50 chance it could still fail. It may play out. We'll have to see about that. It depends on CPI, of course. So no, there's going to be a risk of more downside, but we'll be watching the support just to be safe. We have a similar setup developing on ES. So we have like a left shoulder here. We have this head and a right shoulder. We need to hold between 58.60 and about 58.40 is our support in this range. If that holds, we could try to bounce back up to 5900 plus. And if we lose this, we could be dumping even lower. So I'll be watching to see if the inverse head and shoulders holds and if we could break past our 200 EMA. Overall, though, there's a nice accumulation that's forming. We'll have to be watching this very, very closely. So watch and see if the inverse head and shoulders pans out, if this ends up holding. And we'll be very, very quiet nonetheless just to see how things end up going. So like I said before, there's this left shoulder here. There's a head right over here. Then we have this right shoulder that could be forming. We'll see if we end up holding between 58.40 and 58.60. Then we'll be watching to see if we get a bounce or not. If we don't get a bounce there, this could continue to collapse. So we'll see about that, because then the trend would remain bearish, making lower highs and lower lows. So we have to get a bounce near here to see this pan out. If not, this will continue to fall and make those new lows. Anyways, looking at the rest of the tickers in less detail, if you look at Nvda, this is also on a downtrend. And now we pushed up to about 236. I said we had to hold that or else this would be dumping. Instead of holding above 236 or 136, excuse me, we saw this thing tip all the way down to 133, and because that's failing, we're continuing to fall. So we're trying to hold 130. We're barely holding that as support. Now we have 133 as resistance. If this doesn't hold 130, this could continue to fall to 128. So just be careful on Nvidia. I want to give you guys a warning because there's weakness that's still developing, because of the fact that we're seeing some new ratings that are coming out and other pieces of news that are negative. So for now, we do look a bit more bearish, and we could continue to fall back down to 130 or below. As far as Bitcoin goes, we pumped very nicely to about that 97,000 area we rejected. So we're looking at support at 95,784. We got to hold that, or else this dumps to the 94,000 range. So be careful, guys. There could be a small dip on Bitcoin if that fails us. For the big guy, Tesla, unfortunately, so we pumped very well to about that 422 area. I was saying that this is going to be testing 420 most likely, but the problem is we're not sustaining these levels. Now we're barely holding support at 407. I call that support out at the 4-hour time frame. We got to hold that, or else it dips back down to about 400. So be careful at Tesla. Let's see if 407 holds. If not, it could be dipping closer to 400. We got this rejection so far, so we'll see if the support holds. We have a confluence of support around 400, which is where our previous trend line is, our 20 EMA, and our other psychological support. So watch to see if that holds. Watch 407. If it doesn't hold, we dip lower. We also have resistance at 410, 414, but we still look bearish. For NQ, we're on a downtrend, and notice we hit our 20 EMA at 21,100. We were not able to hold above this, so now it's tipping again. So this could continue to fall back down to about 20,800. If this rejects, we will need to hold above 21,100. Otherwise, this could continue to fall to 20,800. So just be careful. On the QQQ, same thing. It's on a bit of a downtrend. We need to try to get back above 510. If not, this could continue to fall back down towards 502 or below into the low 500s. So be careful. I wanted to see this break past 510. We were not able to do that. So we'll see if this ends up holding up. I also want to mention that there's a possible inverse head and shoulders on the QQQ. So there's like a left shoulder here. There's like a head, and it could be like a right shoulder. So we have to get a bounce near 500 for this to really pan out. If we don't and we start losing 500, this could continue to collapse. So I hope we get that bounce near 5. Actually, it's 502. I hope we bounce around there to get that, a rebound for the inverse head and shoulders. Otherwise, this remains a lot more bearish. So watch and see if that holds. For now, we do look a little bit weaker. Apple was supposed to hold above 236. If not, I was talking about how it could be dipping to 233. I still hold that view. It could be dipping a little bit lower as just weakness developing on this chart. For the Russell, we pushed very nicely to 222, then we rejected. So now we're very flat. We need to try to get back above 219. This is showing more strength than SPY. We have to hold 219, otherwise this could end up rejecting. So be careful. There's that risk of this coming back down to about the 216 area again. For coin, we pumped very nicely to 268, then we rejected. We need to hold above 258. If we can't hold above that, we could be dipping back down to about 250. Amazon pumped very nicely to 222, but I said watch this ratio, see if we reject or not. We got a rejection so far, so if we can't get back above 220, we're at risk of coming back down towards 217 again. So be careful, guys. There's a risk of Amazon rejecting. Meta tried to push. It was trying to hold up and rejected. We're barely holding 594. We got to hold that, or else this will continue to dump back down towards 588. Also, there's this gap to fill back down to 585, so there's going to be a risk of it dipping to the 580s if we can't hold 594. So watch to see if that holds on Meta. 594.54 to be more precise. Watch those levels very closely, showing some weakness. Microsoft's on a downtrend. We pushed exactly as predicted to 420. I did call out 420, but we did not hold above that. We rejected instead. So if we can't hold above that, we're at risk of coming back down to 412. So be careful with that. Google has the same setup. We're making lower highs. We need to try to get back above 193. If not, we could be dipping closer to about 190. So with that being said, I see some weakness that's developing, at least on these charts. For the VIX, we're barely holding our 20 EMA. We'll have to see if we bounce off this or not. For now, The reason I'm talking about a potential bounce or not is because it's going to be dependent on CPI. That's just another confluence. We saw yields dip just a tiny bit, only about 0.35%, despite PPI coming in as expected. I think the problem that we have is the fact that even though CPI was, sorry, not CPI, PPI was okay on the month over month basis, on the year over year basis, it did go up just a little bit compared to the previous reports. Although that was aligned with expectations, there was a slight increase. That's why we're not seeing yields really crash. Yields are just flat right now. That's why the market is not pumping as hard as it could have. That's the reason why these yields are still continuing to hold up. The dollar is also still holding up well. So we'll see what CPI causes. That's going to be the next major catalyst the market's waiting for. With that being said, guys, we'll see if the inverse head and shoulders plays out on SPY or not. And we'll find out by tomorrow. So be patient, guys. Don't remember to always manage risks and don't just go all in on financial advice when I say that. But you want to be very careful because these setups don't always pan out, right? That's why it's very important to always manage risks. Anyways, not financial advice. I'll see you guys again in just a couple of hours. Until then, thank you for listening and peace out.